if you hear any background noise, we were playing a game when we recorded this because we were doing stuff for our Let's Play on our channel. But I did want to talk for a few minutes about James Earl Jones. I had another video for today I was working on, but this is something where it's really difficult when someone dies, obviously no matter who it is. If you don't talk about it, people think you don't care. Mm-hmm. But if you do talk about it, I think you run the risk of being like all those people when Michael Jackson died, where it was like, you know, everybody was criticizing him, and then all of a sudden everybody was like Michael Jackson's #1 fan. Mm-hmm. Or like how you pointed out that happened with Prince too, you know, where it was like all of a sudden everybody was the biggest Prince fan ever. So you're just gonna have to take our word on it when we say that we were obviously fans of James Earl Jones' work. And this is something that really, I don't know, it's hard because, like, you know, we don't know this person, right? It's nothing like, you know, a family member when, you know, they pass away or anything like that. But it's interesting how, you know, you kind of get to know someone in a way through their work. And by all accounts, James Earl Jones was like a very kind man. He did all these projects that I think were very interesting that people might not know about. Like, for example, he narrated the Bible in a project too. He did narration voices in a lot. He was even willing to come back to do children's storybooks that had narration, like those old ones, you know, that would have tapes in them or that would have the audio recordings with them.
Yeah, right.
So I think it's very easy, and we'll probably talk a lot about Star Wars today, Nate, you and me, but I think it's very easy to just look at Star Wars and say, this guy was Darth Vader. And it's absolutely true. But also, he was somebody who contributed to so many different pieces of media and works and affected the lives of so many people. He died at 93.
He lived a full life.
He lived a full life, and at 93, he was still positively affecting people's lives. He was still doing his work, trying to make people happy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I kind of wanted to talk to you about that for a few minutes today. I can only dream, you know, not that anyone ever wants to die at a particular time, but to have a life as significant as this man's, you know, where you're at 93 and you're still positively impacting people. I think that's something really, I don't know, really important and special. I don't know what to say about it. It's just, it's genuinely just shocking. Like, it felt to me like he would never pass.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Betty White felt like.
Yeah.
She just kind of was that person that, you know, was there. Didn't matter how old she got, it just, Betty White was always around.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was... The sad thing is when people start getting to, like, their 80s and 90s, it's not really, like, shocking, you know, when they die, but it kind of is. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because as people start getting older, you know, you start to just think that that's what it is. Like, this person's always going to be around, and I think especially for celebrities and stuff like that, like, we don't know them personally.
I think that's why it gets really hard to talk about, because you also... And I don't think anyone wants to be, like, to come off this way, but I never want to come off as the person where, you know, like, when Paul Walker died, that genuinely really bothered me.
Right.
His life was cut very short. Not to make this about someone else, I'm just saying... that really stuck with me. I remember I used to work at Target during that time. I was working at Target. I was on my way home, and I found out that Paul Walker died.
Yeah.
And it genuinely ruined my whole day.
Yeah, it was, that's how I was when Carrie Fisher died.
Yep, same.
I found that out, and I just had, like, you know, like, my heart dropped.
It made me want to cry.
I'm sitting here like, really? Like, it was so upsetting, and, I mean, it still is kind of upsetting to me.
And when Chadwick Boseman died, he died from a similar form of cancer to my father.
Yeah.
You know, that was one that really stuck with me, where... And I remember people were mocking him, you know, up to his death and saying, like, oh, crack Panther, because they were saying he was abusing drugs and shit like that.
Yeah,
but then later on, those same people found out, oh, he was doing treatments and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, so I think, one, when this kind of stuff is happening, you got to be very careful how you address it. Two, I think that, you know, things like Chadwick Boseman or, you know, those situations, I think, remind you, like, you got to be careful how you're judging people, too.
Yeah.
Because you don't know their life. Something with James Earl Jones, though, for me, that I think you just said that kind of resonated is you think that they'll be around forever because they have been.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's not like Paul Walker, where it's like he dies really young.
Yeah,
you know,
that was a shocking thing because no one was expecting it.
And this was a shocking thing to me because it's like, well, James Earl Jones, he's Darth Vader. He's like 90, he's still doing Darth Vader's voice.
Right.
What a badass. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's like, well, now he's gone. It's like, is it a shock someone passes in their 90s? No, but it's a shock that he did.
Yeah, right.
Because you just think, especially with a voice, a voice actor. I mean, he did a lot of normal, in-person acting too. But when you have a voice like that, it feels like it's larger than life. Like it is the character.
Yeah.
Especially someone wearing a helmet.
Right, and I think for actors and actresses, for someone in your personal life, it's upsetting, when someone dies because you know them. Mm-hmm. You know them personally, you maybe see them every day if it's a family member, or you see them very often, their personal life, their backstory, where they came, whatever, them.
And you have like an emotional connection.
Yeah, you have an emotional attachment to that person, whether it's a friend or a family member, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But for actors and actresses, we don't really know them for their personal level. We know them for their roles. And maybe we get to know them on the personal level, depending on how, media friendly they are. Maybe we get to know, them about them personally, but a lot of what we know about these people are roles.
Yes.
So for us, when we think of James Earl Jones, our minds go to, Darth Vader, and, he was in Field of Dreams, and Mufasa. We start thinking of all the things and the ways that he impacted us through media in our life. And, not that that's all that matters about them. Mm-hmm. I understand they are a person. Their movie roles is not the only thing that matters in life, but
no, absolutely.
I'm just saying
their family too, obviously.
I'm just saying in general, for us like regular folk, this is what we know. And it's upsetting because this is what we've always known,
Right.
Like, we know James Earl Jones as Darth Vader. He's just kind of the iconic voice of Vader. We know him as, Mufasa and whatnot. And all of a sudden they go, and you're just kind of like, oh. Like, it doesn't feel real. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I guess I don't know what I'm...
No. I think that's all true. And as you were talking, I was listening to you. I was also looking up some of the other things that he was in that I didn't necessarily know.
Yeah.
Because you're right. I mean, to me, just to speak for a minute to Darth Vader, that one is hard for me because you see this guy in this helmet, and I think that it goes to show how talented James Earl Jones was. I know a lot of people are going to cover this from the aspect of Darth Vader. I'm sorry, if you want it covered from the aspect of being upset about not getting Field of Dreams 3.
Well, I'm upset about that.
But for me, that was always kind of where he...
that's his iconic thing.
That's what I knew him for.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah.
It's crazy because he was so talented that he was able to take this faceless character, and he was able to make this character, I guess I shouldn't say faceless, he had a helmet, but
yeah,
he was without a human face that you could see, facial expressions.
Yeah, right.
And you could tell his voice inflections, they provided emotion, or they provided context. When Vader was angry at an admiral and he was going to choke someone, he was, obviously behaved in one way. When he spoke to Luke and he showed a little bit of tenderness in Return of the Jedi, when they're basically going to meet the Emperor, and Luke says to Vader, I know who you used to be. Mm-hmm. You can turn back to the light. And the way Vader says it, like, it's too late for me. Like that kind of way. I'm not a voice actor, so don't, and I'm not even going to try and be James Earl Jones here. But, that was very different than when he said, like, you're part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor, type stuff at the beginning of A New Hope. I think that...
We have Walmart Day, James Earl Jones here.
You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take him away. Uninterested Vader. I'm like the Disneyland Vader they couldn't afford. They couldn't afford the good Disneyland Vader, so I'm even worse. Some of those people are extremely talented too. But my point is, I think it's crazy that, this person was so talented that they could take these characters and this character in particular that I'm thinking of, and make him have a personality when he's basically just like a walking dark suit of armor.
Yeah, right.
I think that's incredible, and there were so many things that he did in his life that people, love him for, obviously, and roles and things like that. And there were so many things that he did in terms of, like, in real life that made people love him and think he was a kind man and obviously interact with him in those ways. He's not somebody I ever got to meet, so I can't speak from that angle, but I can say that from all accounts, he was a very respectful, kind, good man.
Yeah, right.
And I think that that's something that is, unfortunately, it feels like it's more and more rare. Maybe it always was, and we just didn't know. You know, because you didn't see the 24/7 news cycle where it's like, this celebrity got outed for trying to solicit some person, or this celebrity, you know, got drunk and, like, hit somebody, or, you know, whatever. Like, we didn't used to find those things out. So maybe it was always rare. But I feel like in today's world, at least, it's rare to find someone so talented with a good heart.
Yeah.
You know, that later on it's not like, oh, by the way, they were a piece of crap.
Right.
I think that that's where the world really loses something with James Earl Jones, is they don't... Look, he's not replaceable, but other people have played Vader, like, in video games. He didn't really play him in video games. I don't know why, but, you know, he just didn't.
Yeah.
It's not like the roles, even though it's, you know, you're not going to fill that void. It's not like you can't do anything with that character anymore. But to me, I don't think you can replace the good man. You know, like the same way you could recast T'Challa, and I know there's been a big push for that. You know, that's just something I think of. You could recast Brian in Fast and Furious. There's a push for that. But you can't recast the heart of the person. Right. You know, like you can't get that person back.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like, it's like you can get... Now, look, when you look at things like Rogue One, to me, amazing. You know, like when you have James Earl Jones show up again, when Star Wars finally came back to the big screen, and it's like, whoa, like Vader's in this, and it's him. You know, incredible. Or even in Revenge of the Sith, you know, he went, I believe, uncredited for whatever reason, at least originally, but he does the final Vader lines.
Yeah.
And I think that you can find ways around this person who played the character. It's not going to be the same, first off. And I would hope that you don't try and make it be. I would hope that you just try and stay true to that character, not go into that, you know, with a mindset of, I'm going to replace this person.
Yeah.
I don't think you can do that.
Right.
But to me, what is really sad is that you're not going to get that human being back. You know, you're not going to have that special person who played Vader. Now, you hope that there's another person who comes along who's a good man who plays Vader, but we just lost the guaranteed one. We just lost this person who was not just a good actor, but also a good person. I don't know. I feel like I said the same thing a few times. I don't know if that makes any sense. I hope it does, but that to me is where I think this becomes very heartbreaking, is because no one is going to be James Earl Jones. No one's going to be Carrie Fisher. No one's going to be Chadwick Boseman. No one's going to be, you know, any of these guys.
Well, and that,
or girls.
And that's where the humanity aspect of these things come into play. Is these people are characters, they're iconic, but they're also humans. You know, and there are human beings that are kind of genuinely dicks in life. I'm not wishing death on them. I'm just saying there are people who are dicks.
And when they die, it's not... I don't think it's as impactful to you.
Yeah, it's not happy, but I'm just saying it's not like losing someone like James Earl Jones.
Right.
Losing like someone like James Earl Jones. Yes, it's sad for his acting abilities, but it's also sad because, like, this was a good person.
Yeah.
And you're kind of now just feeling bad about that. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it obviously, you know, he's one of those actors that I think has had a very big impact on people's lives, whether they know it or not. You know, media is something, whether it's video games or movies or TV shows, whatever, media is something that in the modern age, at least in the last, like, 80 years, has been something that I think impacts everyone's life. You know, some more than others, but James Earl Jones to me is someone that his voice is so iconic.
Yes.
Someone like Morgan Freeman, the two of them do a lot of voice acting work, and the two of them are people that whenever you hear their works, it's like, oh yeah, I know that is. Like, it's an iconic voice. Whether it's narration for movies or TV shows, whatever it is, or you mentioned books Jones has done, but it's just he has that voice that stands out. So if it's something like Vader, We all know Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
We all, whether you're the biggest Star Wars fan or you hate Star Wars, we know Darth Vader.
And you can
we
typically
know the voice.
You can typically tell that it's not him,
right?
In like a video game. You can tell it's fine.
Yeah,
you know, like,
but it's not the original.
No,
it's not
like,
James Earl Jones.
I thought the guy whoever it was, I don't know, no disrespect, who played him in things like Jedi Fallen Order.
Yeah,
or
they did fine.
Yeah, or even things like Force Unleashed.
It was good.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's just not him. And that's the problem, if
you're always going to have that.
Yeah, I mean, and that just speaks to him as an iconic figure.
Oh yeah, because
his voice is Darth Vader.
Well, but you've seen times where, again, not to wish death on anyone or say like, oh well, good riddance to anybody, but you've seen examples where someone dies or moves on from a role and somebody else steps in and does it better.
Yeah, right.
There are examples that I don't think here would be the place to list them. I think that would be a little tacky, but you know what I mean, like, or does it just as well. And this has always been a debate we talk about James Bond sometimes. This is always a debate with James Bond. Oh, well, this guy was better. Oh, this guy was just as good. Oh, this guy's underrated. There are a lot of roles like that, but I don't think, like, a lot of the roles I know him from, and even you know him from, like even things in Field of Dreams, I don't think that you would expect someone else to come in and do it just as good or better than James Earl Jones.
Right.
That's a big difference here to me. Just like, I think that's why they were afraid to do things like, recast T'Challa, because it's like, who's going to come in and do a better job at this than Chadwick did?
Yeah, right.
That's difficult. That's a pretty big shoes to fill, and I think that James Earl Jones left huge shoes to fill as like a kind person and as talent.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I still like baseball, movies in general. So I haven't grown out of it. I'm not saying that, but when I was a kid, I was really into baseball movies. That's when I watched Field of Dreams. Yeah. I really liked that movie. But another movie I really enjoyed was Sandlot. I loved that movie when I was a kid.
I remember I watched that at my aunt's house on her old VHS player.
Yeah.
She lived in, not to steal your story because I want to hear yours too, but she lived in a farm, with her husband, and they both passed away now, which is really sad, but that was my dad's sister and, her husband, and they ran a farm and stuff, and they didn't have much technology, but they had VHS tapes and a crappy old TV for when their, obviously their children were there and stuff. And I remember watching that movie, and it didn't even click with me till later what you said that he was in that. I didn't even remember that.
Yeah,
but he
movie.
absolutely was.
Yeah, he was kind of like a side character. He's not like a main character in the movie, but when I was a kid, now this was before I had technology, I wasn't looking up on IMDb or anything like that. In fact, I probably wouldn't even know how to do that when I was a child.
I don't think it existed.
But I probably not. But I remember watching Sandlot, and, the first time I watched it, I saw him in the movie, and it was like, yeah, I feel like I recognize him from something, and then I watched it again, and it was like, oh, he sounds familiar. What is it?
It was the voice
and
doing
then
it for you.
And then I watched it again, and it's like, that's Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And now at this point, I had seen episodes 1 and 2. I had not seen 3, but I watched episodes 4 and 5. And so I had heard Vader, obviously. I didn't even realize, the first time I watched Sandlot, or the second time, but I recognized the voice. It was that iconic voice. I was like, I have heard this before. Who is this? And then the third time I watched it, it clicked. But I just think that's kind of, his voice is... when you see him as like a person, and then you hear his voice, it's that type of voice that resonates with people.
I think a lot of people don't have that type of voice. I don't think, and again, not to make it about me, I don't think you or I have that type of voice where, if we were randomly in some movie, someone would be like, it's that guy, if they had heard us before.
I mean, maybe I do, but you don't.
You absolutely do, especially when you do the booming, sexy bedtime voice.
Exactly.
But I think that, for him, it's like this is such an iconic and very particular way that he spoke. It was very articulate. It felt like somebody who had a story, who had been somewhere in every character he played. Like Vader, you knew that he was more than just this Sith Lord. You knew that he had lived this entire life and stuff, and he was this mysterious character who was able to portray that in different ways, right? Like in different scenes, he'd speak differently to Luke, then he would speak to the Emperor, then he would speak to, Leia at the beginning of A New Hope, all those things. Then he would speak to Han when the torture scene in 5. You get what I mean. Like, he was able to portray all these things, but still be in character as that person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's why, you know, like, why it stands out to you so much. It was so particular and so him.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds so stupid, because I guess you could say that about anybody.
Well, yeah, but you can, but there's some that applies to more than others, you know, and I think that's who James Earl Jones was, is he stood out.
And that's not to say his life mattered more than mine or yours or someone else's. It's just that I think that he affected so many people, especially through these roles and through his life. I mean, this reminds me of Dick Van Dyke. You know, Dick Van Dyke was recently doing an interview. I believe he's in his 90s now as well. He's still doing work.
He's another one that I'm very, very going to be upset about.
Yes, I absolutely am too, because it's this idea of this person who's been around your whole life. I think the other thing that sucks, this is my one deep point of the day, I think this reminds you of the fact that we're not around forever.
Yeah, right.
And I think it kind of reminds people that they have to kind of look for, you know, what are they going to put their hope in? What are they going to live their life for? How do they want to be remembered?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of life do they want to live? You know, because the fact that you've got guys like Dick Van Dyke and James Earl Jones, Dick Van Dyke's still in his 90s, James Earl Jones passed in his 90s, who were still positively affecting the world.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of people. I had to work in an old folks home at one point too for a while. And that was like during the end of high school. I've seen a lot of people that are sadly waiting to die.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are young and some of them are old, who are just kind of passing life by. They're just kind of floating through it. And I think that's something, you know, when you see a guy like James Earl Jones, I think that kind of reminds you that life can have a purpose no matter how long you live, no matter what you believe. I think too, I know that this is something that's been used by a lot of bad people as well. And so my goal on this channel, though I have my own beliefs, is never to like preach at people. But I do think it's interesting that James Earl Jones was Catholic, you know, and he believed in that faith. He believed in God. He had converted during his time in the military, and, you know, he went on to live like this very beautiful life where he went on to try and spread kindness and love and be a good person. And I think he absolutely could have just been a dick and, like, you know, lived a bad life and still been Darth Vader and got paid bank. You know, not at first. He got paid very badly in his original voice appearance. But, you know, I think those are choices that people have to make. And when you look at a guy like James Earl Jones, you see what he lived his life for, the kind of person he wanted to be, the effect he had on people. I think that's really powerful. And I think that, unfortunately, it's often right around people's death that you see that. You know, like Paul Walker, I believe, was kind of embracing Christianity around the time of his death. He was rectifying things with his family. He had just repaired his relationship with his daughter. And then he passed. And I think a lot of times we don't know these things about people, or we don't, you know, we just see the voice, we just see the character, and we don't know what's going on in their life. We don't know if it's a life of kindness. We don't know if it's a life of purpose. We don't know if it's a life of just chasing money and being an asshole, except when that kind of thing comes out in the news. I guess to me, I think it says a lot about James Earl Jones that he lived this kind of life where it wasn't always coming out he was a jerk. Especially in the modern day where it's very easy to get caught for really anything. Interpret that how you will. Like, sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a very bad thing. But I think when you look at, like, his beliefs in his life, I think that's what's really powerful to me, is like...
He's someone that lived it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's people that say they believe in that stuff, but they don't live it, but there's people that actually live it out.
Yeah, and then went on to affect so many people.
Yeah, right.
And whether you look at him in one way or another, maybe he affected somebody and they didn't even know it by, like, doing the Bible narration that they heard when they were a kid. Or maybe he affected them by being Darth Vader. I think that's not something you can say about a lot of people. I think a lot of people don't even want that. It's like they just kind of float through life thinking about themselves. And I think everybody's guilty of this. I'm absolutely guilty of it a lot of times, where you're so focused on yourself that you're trying to chase these things that'll make you happy. Like, well, I need more money. Well, I need a nicer thing. Well, I need this person. I don't think that was the kind of man he was. I think that's interesting to me. Not that he was perfect, no one is.
Right.
But I think that it's very interesting to me that he lived a life where he showed the kind of man he was. You know, just like you said, I guess.
Right.
I find that, I don't know, I find that special.
And it kind of makes it more sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he was a good person, actual good person. And it's always pretty sad when the world loses those people.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's kind of a last thought I had too. Not to sound like really sentimental here or whatever, but growing up in my life, there's a lot of people, like, I kind of grew up in the age of media. I mean, me and you did too.
Like movies, games.
Yeah, movies, games, video games, whatever.
Comics,
so, like, yeah,
like
we're all
was around.
We're always being inundated. Thank you. By some form of media that is around us.
Well, yeah, you can never get away from that. You get in the
yeah.
car, the radio's on. You
Right.
go home, the internet's there. You go to a store. There's books.
And I think for a lot of people like boomers and the silent generation and stuff like that, a lot of them got that type of stuff later on in life, so they didn't grow up with it. They might have had it in their 20s or something like that, but for us, it's basically since our birth. We've had this stuff. So I think for a lot of people nowadays, movie characters, TV show characters, video game characters, these things matter a lot more to us because they affected our childhood. And when I think of my childhood and I think of some of the best moments that I've had in my life, I think of like playing video games with my brother. I think of playing video games with you. I think of playing video games with my other friend growing up. I think of watching movies with my family. I think of watching movies with my brother or whoever. Like, these are the things I think about. This is like the good stuff. I learned a lot of lessons from these people and so on. And there's a lot of actors or actresses in those roles that to me mean a lot more than just their character. And someone like James Earl Jones is totally that. Darth Vader was a huge character for me growing up. It still is.
Yeah.
I mean, he's my favorite Star Wars character, and Star Wars is like my favorite media thing of all time. If it's not my favorite, it's like my top 3. So this has always been something that for me personally has been, I've seen the writing on the wall for a while, but you never wanted to believe it was actually going to happen.
Right.
And now that it happened, it's actually like, you're kind of losing a childhood hero of yours, kind of. Someone that growing up has always meant a lot to you, and you've always seen that role and heard the voice and everything, and it's meant a lot to you in your life. So I don't know, I find it very sad. It's one of those, like Carrie Fisher, kind of the same thing. It's characters that you grew up with, you're now having to see them leave. And that's kind of upsetting.
Yeah. And I think, you said it best, it's like they matter to you more than just a character because, like, they affected you when you were young.
Right.
Whereas, like, I think our parents' generation, it was like they were seeing this stuff when they were 20.
Yeah, and not that movie characters or actors or anything like don't matter to those people. But I'm just saying they probably didn't grow up with Star Wars, like, from when they're 5.
Right.
Star Wars came out when they were teenagers or something.
Right.
So that's kind of the difference.
Yeah,
and maybe Gen X is also kind of in this range with us, millennials and so on, but I'm just saying in general, we kind of grew up with media since we were kids.
Yeah.
So these things affect our life.
Well, the same way I think that we care about things like the MCU, but I think that, we were getting out of high school when that was kind of starting to be a thing.
Yeah.
And whereas, like, I think younger people, it'll be like when Robert Downey Jr. dies.
That'll be
like
huge.
their James Earl Jones.
Yeah, right, because they grew up with Iron Man, they grew up with Captain America and so on. Yeah. And we kind of did too, but, younger than us.
Yeah. No,
right.
I totally get what you're saying. I don't know, it's funny to me that when I first read this, I thought, this is sad. I feel like we should talk about this, but it didn't really hit me until we started talking about it, how sad it was.
Yeah, right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like it registered with me, but it was kind of like, that's sad. And now that we're talking about it, it's like,
this is really sad.
Yeah, like this actually really matters.
Yeah.
And I already thought it mattered, but it's like I didn't really.
You didn't realize the impact right away.
Yeah.
And then you started thinking about it, it's like, holy crap.
Yeah, like, not to be unfair to Jill, who just got home from work in the background, but I kind of feel like this ruined my whole night in a way.
Yeah.
Just finding this out, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's like I don't know, like you said, I would just be repeating what you said, but it just feels like you're, losing a piece of your childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's kind of reminding you that nobody lives forever.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. In closing, one thing I want to say is, I think I said it before, I can only hope and pray that I can live a life where at a fraction of that age, I'm still positively benefiting people in some way or making people happy. Because I think that the fact that, he was in his 90s still doing that, I think I've said it twice, but it's true. Who can say that?
Right.
Not many people.
Yeah.
Most people get to their 70s, they're like, well, I quit.
Yep. Checked out. I lived a life.
Living for me now.
Yep.
Now I'm going to watch TV for the next 20 years and then die.
Yeah.
And it's like, obviously you can do what you want with your life, but I think I think there's a difference of specialness, I don't know, of purpose in the life James Earl Jones lived versus, well, I got to 65, time to retire, now it's all about me.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of crazy. Like, this guy didn't need to come back for Rogue One or Star Wars Rebels or anything. He came back because he loved the character, loved the fans, had this appreciation for what he was doing. He didn't need the money. Mm-hmm. He could have done whatever he wanted. And then I think it makes certain people look much worse who, like, don't value their characters or their livelihood or what they have when they're here, when you see guys like James Earl Jones who did all the way into their 90s. I think that makes people look a lot worse too when you see an actor that's an ass.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
It's like,
turns them off to it.
Because it's like, dude, you're 40.
Right.
Like, why are you being a dick? This guy was 90 and he was still living a life of being a good man. I know that, you're told not to compare yourselves to people, but I genuinely think more people should try to compare themselves to James Earl Jones. Be a good person. Try to have that positive impact. Ask yourself what you live for, what your beliefs are, what you want to put your faith in, whatever, any of that stuff. Those questions he was willing to ask, and then live a life of kindness. I think if even a small percentage of people were willing to do that, the world would be a lot better.
Yeah.
And I think, though, that kind of thing is hard to do. That's an uncomfortable thing to think about. It's an uncomfortable question to ask. It's very difficult to live a life not just for you when it feels like people around you are. And so then you feel like, well, if I don't do this, I'm falling behind. Like all these people, I don't know, that's something I've struggled with, where I've seen, like, a lot of people and I'm like, well, they're getting ahead of me because, like, they're thinking about them. Why don't I think about me? And then you see guys like James Earl Jones who lived this accomplished life but didn't have that mentality. And I think it's a really good thing to see because it's something we don't see enough of. It feels like a lot of times in life, the people who are not the nicest are the ones who get the farthest.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, that not to be like a downer. I'm just saying I think it's nice to see examples like James Earl Jones where it's the opposite. Because I think it's very disheartening to see a lot of people, the way they behave and what they do, and how much they're rewarded for it by people.
Yeah, unfortunately, the world does not have enough James Earl Joneses in it.
No, or enough Dick Van Dykes, or enough, Chadwick Bosemans, or any of these people. It just, it's sad. And so when you lose one, I think it's really impactful.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Nate, do you have anything else here?
Nothing much more. That wouldn't be just repeating what we've already said.
Yeah.
It was pretty sad today.
I thought
I've said that a million times, but
I thought it was going to be a 10-minute video where we just talk about, hey, Darth Vader affected our lives.
Yeah.
This is really sad, and then it turned out to be like a whole thing. I don't know. Again, if just a fraction of people would try and live a life kind of similar to that, I think the world would massively improve. So, I'm interested to hear what you guys think down below. I don't really feel like this is a good video to shill anything, to be like, hey, go check this out. But if you want to see more kinds of stuff, you can check the description, I guess. There's that. So we'll see you in the next one. Have a fantastic day. Mine's not going to be a fantastic night after that news, but hopefully tomorrow will feel better. As always, everyone, stay shway.